is Norma Reel from Norma's Quilt Studio, and I'm here to do another Learning Corner with Norma, and this time we're going to talk about cutting accurately. And so one of the big things we need when we cut accurately, of course, is we need a fabric, and we need our fabric to be real nice and flat. So when we get it out of our bag, it's always folded and everything's folded up. So one of the things we want to do right away is get it nice and flat. So first off, I'm going to talk about width of fabric because that's how we're going to cut our piece of fabric. So width of fabric is from the side selvage to selvage, and you put it just like this, and that's where it comes out of the mill, and you'll see the holes on the side, and you fold it in half, and that's how we're going to cut width of fabric. So length of fabric, just so you know, is this way, and that's when you get it cut at the fabric store and it has a raw edge on each side. So we're going to do width of fabric, and that's WOF, and you'll see that a lot in your patterns, and you're going to say, Norma, that's woof. No, that's width of fabric, but it kind of looks like woof when you look at it, right? So sometimes if you're new to quilting, you'll go, what does that mean? So we're going to do, and we're going to spread it out like this, and we're going to take it over here, and we're going to use a little bit of best press, which I talked to you about using. Boy, I got that iron hot, don't I? All right, so we're going to spray a little bit of best press on it just to freshen it up a little bit and give it a little spark. And I'm going to do a session eventually. I think 2 sessions from now, I'm going to do a session on pressing versus ironing. So I am ironing this piece mostly right now because it's a whole piece of fabric. With your blocks, you don't want to do that. You want to press, right? So we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about that subject. Okay, so your mat. That's another big thing that you need when you're cutting. So this is an Olfa mat, and it is 18 by 24, and I do like you to have at least an 18-inch mat for the smallest mat when you go to class, because you want to be able to put your whole piece of fabric on it, and so this section that's 24, you can do that. And I like the self-healing mats, just so you know, I talked about that in my tools and tips. But the self-healing mat, what it actually is it's layers, and then it's got the plastic layers and it's got the vinyl layer on top. And that vinyl layer on top, once the knife blade releases, it kind of looks like it heals itself and it closes up. But self-healing mats do wear out over time, so make sure that you replace your mat as needed. And don't ever leave it in a hot car, right? Anybody had that experience? That mat just goes shoop. And it's very hard to fix that. It's kind of ruining the mat, so don't do that. The other thing that we're going to need is we're going to need our rotary cutter, and I like the Olfa 45mm one, and I like the one that has that ergonomic handle to it. So that's the one I'm going to use today. And we're going to put our fabric right on the mat, and we're going to put it with a line, a grid line right along here along the bottom. And then we need an edge over here because we know that we can't cut unless we have a perfect 90-degree angle over here. So that's going to give us our perfect cut. So I've got my fabric along the fold line this way, and I like to stand when I'm cutting as well. It just gives me a better feel for my body, the way it's going to work with the cutting mat. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you several different ways that I use to cut fabric. And you can cut on the left or cut on the right, but if you're right-handed, you're always going to want to cut on the right side of your ruler. So the first thing we're going to do is get that raw edge straight. So I'm going to take off my safety lock on my rotary cutter so I can use it. And I'm going to show you the first method of cutting, and that is what I call the spider method. And that's when you're going to put all your fingers and spread them apart. Don't put them across the ruler in any way so that you cut your finger, obviously. You're going to spread your fingers out and hold this mat just like this, or hold the ruler just like this on the mat. Then what we're going to do is we're going to cut, and I'm going to cut one swoop, okay? Just once. Now, the thing you want to remember when you're doing that, some of you have been cutting for a long time. This is going to be for my beginners. You're going to want to make sure that you keep your arms straight. You don't want to do this, and you don't want to do too much of this. You want to be able to put your rotary cutter down, and I usually like to put my finger right there and give it a little bit extra pressure because we're going through 2 layers of fabric. So we're going to start back here, and I also tell people to give yourself a running start. So you're going to start a little bit before the fabric. You're going to do your spider method and hold it, and then you're going to go straight up just like that. All right? And then I'm going to put your safety on because you got to be careful. These are sharp. And then you have that perfect cut, and you'll see that we have our perfect 90-degree angle that we need. Now let's say that we're going to cut a 6.5-inch piece. So we're going to do that first. And what I like to do is do the 2-ruler method. I am going to promise you that you will be exactly accurate if you do this method. It works every time. So you can use your mat and you can count over 6.5. And I would suggest that maybe you do that, but I want you to use your ruler as your guide, and because the ruler is actually more accurate than a pre-printed mat. So I'm going to tell you that 2-ruler method is going to be the most successful with the most accurate fabric. So you get your 6.5-inch ruler. This is going to be easy because I'm doing a 6.5, and I'm going up and down, and I'm making sure that that is perfectly right here. And if it's not, I can take my fingers and go this way. I can take my fingers and go this way, and I can make sure that it's absolutely perfect because we want a perfect 6.5-inch. Now I'm going to show you the walking method, how I do the walking method of cutting fabric. So we're going to start down here, flat with our palm, and we're going to go up, and then we're going to walk our fingers. I'm not moving my rotary cutter. We're walking our fingers up, not moving the rotary cutter, and I'm keeping that ruler nice and straight and going straight up until I get to the end. And so I walked my fingers all the way up, and I have a perfect 6.5-inch piece. All right, we're going to challenge ourselves next, and we are going to cut a 3.5-inch piece. All right, so I've still got my line here, I've got my line here, and it's pretty good, but I'm going to tell you, after you make about 3 or 4 cuts, you might want to readjust your fabric and cut that raw edge again because it can easily get out of wonky a little bit. So I have a 3.5-inch ruler here. I can do that, but I'm going to challenge you because most of us have bigger rulers and we don't always have a 3.5-inch. So what I want to do is challenge you to use your bigger ruler and do a 3.5-inch cut. So how do you do that, Norma? What you do is you find 3.5 inches on your Creative Grids ruler and you put it, and what I did to help me is there's these little tapes that you can get, and I take these little tapes and put right there on my bigger ruler where my 3.5 inches, especially if I'm going to need like a whole bunch of 3.5-inch pieces, then I mark my ruler. So sometimes when people use the 2-ruler method and they put it down to do the 3.5 inches, what they do is they turn the ruler this way. Oh no, that's not going to work because this is a 7.5-inch ruler, and when you go this way, that 3.5 inches is going to be off. So you definitely have to pay attention that this is 1 and this is 3.5 and you're going this way. So I want to make sure, because I have had beginners that go, all my fabric's off and I used the 3.5-inch ruler. Well, they twisted it. So don't do that. So here we have our 3.5 inches, and I know you're not going to do that, right? So we got our 3.5-inch ruler. We're going to go up and down, and I can see right here, about right here, that it needs to go over a little bit. Needs to go over a tiny bit more. And it needs to go this way a tiny bit. I trust the mat. I do trust the mat, but I do feel like this ruler is way more accurate and it gives you something to bump it up to. So this is the 2-ruler method that I encourage you to try the next time you're doing cutting, and you are going to absolutely love it. One thing I wanted to show you is I wanted to show you the gripper. And so let me get my gripper real quick because I wanted to show you that. Okay, so here's my gripper. I like to use this sometimes, and I showed you this in my tools, so I'm going to show you how this works. So I'm going to put it on my ruler, and I'm going to push these down just like this, and it grips that ruler. Voila! So there you go. Isn't that cool? So now I'm going to put it back, and I'm not even looking at my mat. All I'm looking at is this ruler right here. So I'm looking at this ruler. I'm going to adjust it again. And we've got it perfectly at 3.5 inches. All right, perfect. All you got to do is hold this and cut. How smooth is that? 3.5 inches, just like that. So this works really well when you're trying to do a lot of fabric and you want it to hold your fabric, and especially if you have trouble with arthritis or your hands, I highly suggest this. All right, last thing I'm going to preach to you about today, is your blade. So you saw how smooth everything went when I was using it. So some don'ts that I'm going to tell you not to do. Don't ever cut your fabric this way towards you. This is very, very sharp. I find some people in class, they're like their bodies are distorted and they're doing this, and I'm like, hold up, stop. So if it's not comfortable, readjust your fabric to cut the right way and cut away from you always. Number 2, when you're doing your cutting and you had ragged edges or pieces of fabric that start floating around, then it means that your rotary cutter is not sharp enough. So change your blade. I tell people, change your blade more often than not. So every quilt that I piece, I change my blade and my rotary cutter because I've used it so much. So I highly suggest you do that. So pay attention. And if I ever see you doing what I call sawing, don't saw. You saw how smooth I made all these cuts because I have a new rotary blade. So use a new rotary blade. Take your time when you're cutting. Don't rush. And you can cut accurately, most accurately with the 2-ruler method. Try it, you'll love it. And so I hope to see you back again for the next session. And we're going to talk about accurate piecing because now we got our 1/4 inch, we got our fabric cut right. So now we're going to piece it all together. So I'll see you guys soon.